Nia sat quietly by the window, the early morning sun casting soft light across the worn seat of the city bus. Every morning was the same. She woke before dawn, prepared tea for her mother, and headed to her first job as a junior assistant at a dusty textile shop. By afternoon, she'd switch uniforms and clock in at the local library, helping school children with their reading lists. Despite the exhaustion, she never complained. This was her life, and she bore it with quiet pride. Her township was humble, lined with rusted rooftops and the aroma of roasted maize in the air. But to Nia, it was home. She shared a two-room house with her mother, whose declining health kept her mostly indoors. Medical bills came in waves, and Nia, being the only child, shouldered them all. She never dressed fancy. Her clothes were from thrift stores, neatly pressed and always clean. Her wristwatch, a faded leather band with a scratched face, ticked faithfully, though it was nearly older than her. People often overlooked her, and when they did notice, it was often to whisper about how she still took public buses or reused handbags. Family gatherings were the worst. Her cousins would arrive in flashy cars, wearing imported perfumes and laughing too loudly. Among them, Vanessa stood out, the loudest, the most glamorous, and the cruelest. She loved making Nia the punchline of every joke. "Still taking the bus?" she would ask, raising an eyebrow as though the mere idea disgusted her. Everyone would laugh, but Nia just smiled softly and sipped her water. She never snapped back. She never defended herself, but her eyes always watched, sharp and quiet, as though taking notes no one would ever see. What they didn't know was that Nia had a mind sharper than any designer stiletto Vanessa owned. She read business magazines during her lunch breaks, listened to investment podcasts on the bus, and spent nights researching African art and heritage fashion. She was building something, slowly, silently, and one day they would all see it. But for now, she stayed in the back seat, both on the bus and in life, letting them believe she belonged there. The long driveway leading up to her uncle's estate felt like a runway, except Nia wasn't walking it in stilettos or sequins. She wore a simple, olive-green dress, soft curls pinned back, and flats that had walked through bus stops and sidewalks more times than she could count. In her purse, she carried a secret no one knew about, a secret wrapped in soft cloth and tucked beside a folded handkerchief. The estate buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the hollow excitement of wealth on display. Her cousins paraded around in designer clothes, loud jewelry, and louder stories. Nia slipped into the background, as always, helping serve drinks, arranging napkins, and answering fake sweet questions with real politeness. Dinner was a grand affair under the garden lights. Crystal glasses shimmered, and waiters passed around endless plates of food. The table seated 15, but the attention centered around Vanessa, dressed in head-to-toe luxury, snapping selfies, and boasting about her new SUV. "So, Nia," Vanessa purred with a smirk, still riding the bus. Her voice sliced through the conversation, drawing amused looks and stifled chuckles from around the table. Nia looked up slowly, her expression unreadable. She didn't respond right away, didn't need to. Her hand casually adjusted the napkin on her lap, and the sleeve of her dress shifted, revealing the aged, intricately designed watch hugging her wrist. Across the table, her father, once a proud man who hadn't spoken more than a few words to her in years, froze mid-chew. His eyes narrowed, locked on the watch. Time itself seemed to pause for him. He leaned in slightly, voice almost trembling. That's not just any watch, is it?" he asked, more to himself than anyone else. His fork clinked against the plate. "That looks like a K.O.'d and Krumer original. There were only 5 ever made." A few heads turned toward Nia. "That's a $2 million collector's piece," he whispered, stunned. "Where did you get that?" Nia simply smiled, a soft, knowing curve of her lips, and took another bite of rice. She didn't owe anyone an answer. Not tonight. Not ever again. Because the watch wasn't just a timepiece. It was a signal that her time had come. 6 months earlier, the dusty corner of the charity shop was where forgotten things went to disappear. Old books with cracked spines, chipped teacups, tangled costume jewelry, and an overflowing box labeled miscellaneous, not sorted. Nia was on her lunch break from her library shift, volunteering at the shop like she often did on weekends. She wasn't looking for anything, just tidying, organizing, giving the broken a little dignity before it was tossed or sold for scraps. That's when she found it, buried beneath a pile of plastic beads and rusted belt buckles. Her hand brushed against something cold and heavy. She pulled it out, a watch. The leather strap was cracked and stiff. The glass face was smudged, and the second hand twitched like it wanted to live again but couldn't. Most would have dropped it back into the pile, but Nia stayed at it for a long moment. There was something about it. The weight, the intricate yet faded engravings, the signature too faint to read without light. She held it up and whispered to herself, "You're not just a watch, are you?" After her shift, she wrapped it gently in a cloth and took it to the only watch repair shop she trusted, a tiny, tucked-away place run by Barbacola, an old man with magnifying glasses always perched on his forehead and jazz music humming from a dusty radio. He examined the watch in silence, then sat back in his chair, visibly stunned. "Where did you find this?" he asked, voice unusually serious. Nia shrugged. "Donation box. This might be a CHUCKLed Nkrumah piece." She frowned. "Should I know that name?" Barbacola's eyes widened. He was a Ghanaian genius, a designer of timepieces that blended West African symbolism with Swiss precision. Before he vanished from public life, he crafted only 5 of these, each with a different tribal emblem hidden inside. He flipped the back open and gasped. He pointed, the adinkra symbol for transformation. "That's the mark." He offered her a sum, generous for a charity find, but Nia declined. Instead, she spent the next few nights reading every article she could find on CHUCKLed Nkrumah. The last known auction of one of his watches had gone for $1.8 million at a private Sotheby's event in Paris. She contacted an appraiser. Authentic, undamaged. One of the missing 5. She wasn't a collector. She wasn't a dealer. But for the first time, she held something rare, valuable, powerful. She didn't sell it. She didn't brag. She simply placed it in a satin pouch, zipped it into her purse, and went back to work, eyes sharper than ever. What others saw as trash, Nia had recognized as treasure. The appraisal came back within days, official, sealed, and undeniable. The watch was authentic, one of the legendary 5 created by CHUCKLed Nkrumah himself. The email from the appraiser included phrases like priceless historical artifact, unmatched craftsmanship, and highest-grade materials sourced globally. But what stood out most was the estimated value, $2 million. Nia didn't react like most would. No panic, no shouting, just a slow breath, as if confirming what she already knew deep inside. She closed her laptop, placed the watch back into its protective pouch, and stared out the window of her tiny bedroom in the township. The neighbors rooster crowed for the 3rd time that day. By the following week, the news had quietly spread through the high-end collector circuit. Nia had left no trace of her name, but word had gotten around. One of the missing Nkrumah timepieces had surfaced. The next day, she received a message on her anonymous email. Subject, Legacy and Opportunity. From Taban Fine Holdings. If you're open to it, I'd love to meet. I believe your discovery could change the course of African luxury history. She met him at a private cafe in the city, far from gossiping neighbors or curious eyes. Mr. Taban was sharp, elegant, and spoke with the calm confidence of a man who had built empires quietly. A collector, yes, but more than that, a visionary. He examined the watch in person. His breath caught the moment he turned it over and saw the adinkra symbol. He looked up at Nia, impressed not just by the item but by the way she carried herself. "I'll give you $2 million. Cash, clean, and legal. Right now." Nia didn't blink. "No." He raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me. I don't want to just sell it," she said. "I want to build something with it. I want this watch story to spark something larger. I want a stake in whatever comes next. Brand, museum, auction, documentary. And in return, you get exclusivity." Silence. Then a slow smile spread across Mr. Taban's face. "You're not just a girl who found a treasure," he said. "You are the treasure." They worked out the deal over hours, partial ownership in a luxury venture he was launching, a brand that would celebrate African heritage through art, fashion, and storytelling. The watch would be the flagship symbol. Her identity would remain completely anonymous until she chose to reveal it. One final condition. Nia leaned in, her voice calm. When the time comes to unveil the watch, I want it tied to something real. Not just money, a movement, a legacy. Mr. Taban nodded. Deal signed. The girl from the bus had just negotiated her way into the heart of an empire, and no one even knew her name. With a deal signed and her stake secured, Nia suddenly had access to something she'd never known before, freedom. But unlike those who win the lottery and rush to spend, she did none of that. There were no new cars, no diamond necklaces, no flashy vacations. Her daily routine barely changed. Except now, it was laced with purpose. The first thing she did was pay off her mother's medical debts. Then she arranged for weekly visits from a trusted physiotherapist and installed a proper water filtration system in their home. When her mother asked where the money came from, Nia simply smiled and said, "From something I believed in." Next, she enrolled in a remote business program offered by a prestigious Pan-African institute. She took night classes online, poring over lectures on brand strategy, supply chain ethics, sustainable textile production, and African economic development. Her room filled with notebooks, swatches of fabric, and bookmark case studies about fashion moguls who started with less than she had. But Nia had no interest in becoming another Western-style designer. She wanted to build something uniquely African, something rooted in her culture, her ancestry, and the quiet resilience of women like her mother. She rented a modest studio above a quiet cafe, tucked between two buildings in the older part of the city. It had no air conditioning, just large windows and creaky floors, but it felt sacred. She spent hours there, sketching designs that honored traditional prints but reimagined them with a modern, minimalist edge. She studied materials and partnered with local weavers and dye artists. Every fabric had a story, every pattern a purpose. Her brand would be more than clothes. It would be a movement. She named it Akini, a word from her grandmother's village meaning that which cannot be taken. The people around her barely noticed the transformation. They still saw the quiet girl from the township. She still wore her old shoes and rode public transport. When asked why she didn't upgrade her life, she would shrug and say, "I'm working on something." Only on rare days did she take out the watch, usually when she needed courage. She'd fasten it gently to her wrist, not to show off, but to anchor herself. To remember that buried treasures still have power. That elegance can be silent. That legacy is not about being seen. It's about knowing who you are, even when no one else does. While the world kept moving, Nia was building her empire one quiet stitch at a time. And no one suspected a thing. The ballroom gleamed under a canopy of golden lights, alive with the hum of dignitaries, entrepreneurs, and creatives gathered from across the continent. This wasn't just a party. It was a celebration of African innovation, legacy, and the future of heritage. The annual gala of Pan-African excellence had never felt more electric. The theme this year, Legacy Time. At the center of the venue stood a glass pedestal under soft spotlight, where an exquisitely restored watch rested. Intricate gold etchings, the Adinkra symbol for transformation shining beneath the glass face. A hush fell over the room as the event host, a respected media mogul, took the stage. "Tonight," he began, "we honor a story not of wealth, but of vision. A story that begins not in luxury, but in humility, brilliance, and quiet power." A screen behind him lit up, showing archival sketches of K.O. Nkrumah's original work. Then, the vintage timepiece, rediscovered. Then, pieces from a new rising fashion label that had taken the industry by storm for its soulful, minimalist Afrofuturism. The host smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, the watch you see before you is one of 5 ever made. Lost for decades, until someone saw its worth, not for the price it could fetch, but for the movement it could spark." The room shifted with curiosity. She is not just the guardian of this watch. She is the founder of Taino Air, a fashion house redefining African legacy. All eyes turned to the center of the room as the spotlight moved, and Nia stepped forward. Gasps! She was draped in an elegant, floor-length gown crafted from rich, hand-dyed fabric designed by artisans from rural cooperatives. The cut was modern, regal, and powerful, blending ancestral reverence with contemporary grace. Her hair was braided into a crown, her posture calm yet undeniable, and on her wrist, the watch. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. In the front row, her family sat frozen. Her father's eyes widened, as if he was seeing her for the first time in his life. Her uncle leaned forward, stunned. And Vanessa stared, mouth parted, eyes locked on the woman who once sat quietly in corners, now standing on a global stage. Nia took the microphone, her voice measured and warm. I was once told I was too quiet to lead, too ordinary to matter. But legacy isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent, waiting for the right moment to be seen. The crowd erupted in applause. Photographers clicked. Investors approached. Designers offered handshakes. And her family, they had no words. For the girl who once rode the bus had just arrived, not in a car, but in history. The week after the gala, Nia's name was everywhere: magazine covers, entrepreneur podcasts, fashion blogs. Her face, once invisible even at her own family table, now graced billboards under the headline, "The woman who wore time and made history." But with recognition came echoes from the past. Her father showed up unannounced one morning, standing awkwardly at the gate of her new studio. He was dressed neatly, too neatly, like he'd rehearsed a visit. Nia hesitated before letting him in. Inside, he looked around, noting the mood boards, fabric samples, and sketches that mapped the blueprint of her empire. "I always knew you were different," he started. "No, you didn't," Nia replied calmly, not with anger but truth. He lowered his gaze. "You're right. I didn't. And I'm sorry. I never saw you. Not really. But I'd like to try now, if you'll let me." Nia offered a small smile. Trying is a good place to start. Later that week, her uncle and aunt requested a meeting. They arrived with a glossy proposal folder and freshly printed business cards. "We were thinking," her uncle said, "maybe you could launch a luxury line under our family's name. You know, keep it in the bloodline." Her aunt chimed in, "Yes, and with Vanessa's following, she could be the face of the campaign. It's a perfect partnership." Nia flipped through the proposal in silence, then closed the folder gently. "Thank you for thinking of me," she said, her voice even. "But I've already found my face and my name, and neither need to be borrowed anymore." They left with tight smiles and disappointed eyes. Meanwhile, Vanessa took to social media. Her followers were treated to vague, poetic quotes. "Some people only shine when they steal your spotlight." Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Support people before they glow, or stay in the shadows when they do. To the untrained eye, it looked like heartbreak. To Nia, it was envy dressed in metaphor. Vanessa later messaged Nia directly. "Proud of you, cousin. We should totally collab sometime, sparkling heart." Nia read the message and paused. She didn't block her. She didn't reply with venom. She simply responded, "Thank you. I hope you're doing well." Then she muted the conversation and moved on. At her next speaking engagement, a young girl in the crowd asked, "Did you do it to prove them wrong?" Nia smiled thoughtfully. "No, I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because silence doesn't mean weakness. It means I was watching, listening, learning, and when my time came, I moved without asking for permission." She didn't need revenge. She had peace, and that was more powerful than any comeback. The dinner table was long, polished, and draped in white silk, set under a crystal chandelier in one of the city's finest hotels. But this time, Nia wasn't the one serving water or sitting silently in the corner. She was co-owner of the luxury hotel, and tonight's family gathering was held in the private dining room she had personally designed, a blend of modern elegance and African artistry. The food was impeccable, the lighting soft, and the atmosphere tense. Everyone had dressed their best. Vanessa wore her usual designer ensemble, matched with a too bright smile. Her parents made forced small talk about how proud they were and how they always knew Nia had potential. Nia, draped in a sleek custom creation from her own fashion line, remained poised, gracious, the perfect host. Her mother sat beside her, glowing with quiet joy, finally honored instead of pitied. Between dessert and champagne, Vanessa leaned back, swirling her glass. "You still holding on to that old watch?" she said, her voice laced with the kind of passive dig that used to sting. But this time, it didn't. Nia looked down at the timepiece on her wrist. Aged yet elegant, a soft glint catching the light. She let out a soft, genuine laugh. "Oh, this little thing," she said with a wink, lifting her arm casually. "It built an empire." The room fell quiet for half a second before soft chuckles rolled in, some awkward, some respectful. Vanessa froze, her smirk unable to form. She said nothing more for the rest of the night. Nia didn't linger in the moment. She shifted the conversation to other guests, giving attention to her younger cousins, asking about their dreams and studies. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to plant seeds. Weeks later, at a mentorship event hosted by her foundation, the Akini Initiative, Nia stood before a room full of young African women, students, single mothers, artisans, and entrepreneurs. Her voice, gentle but unwavering, carried across the hall. "You don't have to shout to be heard," she said. "You don't need the loudest outfit, the fanciest title, or even the biggest bank account to change your life. What you need is belief in your roots, your ideas, your power." She looked down at her watch, then back up at the room full of wide, eager eyes. "This watch didn't change my life. I did. I just listened to what time was trying to tell me." Applause filled the room. Behind her on stage hung the words, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build while you're still here." Nia smiled. The girl who once rode in the back seat now drove something greater than a car. She drove a movement, and the world was finally following her lead.